Currently at Frye Art Museum is Ballast, a powerful exhibit by poet Quenton Baker. I had the privilege of talking with Quenton about the show and about the historic event that inspired it. Well, first of all, a museum exhibit, the first ever. Congratulations, crew.
Thank you.
You can all clap. Congratulations. It's a big deal.
Thank you.
So, Quenton, let's start with what Ballast is based on, right? The 1841 slave revolt aboard the ship Creole. Tell me that story. I'm unfamiliar with this story.
Yeah, so in 1841, by then the United States had banned the transatlantic slave trade. So what was taking place was called the coastwise or secondary slave trade, where people were being sold from the upper South, further south. So the Creole was one of those ships. In 1841, it departed from Virginia on its way to New Orleans. And it was 19 people led by a man named Madison Washington, which is kind of absurd. But Madison Washington and 18 other people commandeered the ship and forced the crew to pilot it to Nassau, because Nassau was a British colony and Britain had abolished the slave trade. So anyone who landed on British soil was not recognized as chattel.
As a slave, they were free.
Right.
Wow, wow. When you learned this story, how did that feel to you?
Well, I think the thing that stuck out was that I hadn't heard about it.
Yeah, right.
I consider myself like, I don't have a PhD in history, but I consider myself in my creative work as someone who's invested in research and invested in history. And so the fact that I hadn't come across what was the only successful large-scale revolt involving American-born enslaved people ever was kind of, I was like, what? So it really just sparked my curiosity to figure out more, as much as I could, about what happened.
Yeah. So the revolt inspired you to create this exhibit. Includes new poems, right, as well as historical documents that you have altered using a poetic technique called erasure. So first, what are the historical documents that you used, and then explain or describe erasure?
Yeah, so the documents are Senate records from the second session of the 27th Congress in 1842. They're depositions and they're letters back and forth from members of the US government and members of the British government in Nassau, just that detail all of the proceedings. Because what happened after the ship ran aground in Nassau was that the United States sued Britain for loss of cargo. So
loss of the people, i.e. cargo, gotcha.
Right, so they sued them for, I think, $200,000. So these documents were critical to that court case, and they were critical to like how the United States was adjudicating itself in this Creole affair.
Right.
So it's the only living record, and it's a record from a dominant perspective, and a perspective that's invested in a certain outcome, in this case, like winning the court case. We
want our stuff, right.
So I wanted to apply this technique, this erasure technique or redaction, because to me, it was a way to excavate this lost speech. There was 135 people that gained their freedom. No one went and talked to anyone. No one went and recorded Madison Washington's version of events. So this was the only speech.
Way to get the story. When you are doing the erasure or the redaction, how do you choose the words or the phrases that you want people, like anyone who comes to the exhibit, to see?
Yeah, so this is, there's a lot of different ways that one could go about it. For me, it was looking for then something that would echo the kind of utterances that were lost, the kind of perspectives and interiority that was ignored and that people were uninterested in, or rather required to not exist. So really it was about finding language that, to me, got at that sense of recovery or that sense of redress. Which
kind of leads into this project, and I read this on the write-up on the Frye website, that this really became more personal over time. It evolved from an historical kind of research into touching on your own life and the life of those that you loved ones. So talk about that kind of transformation into the personal.
Yeah, so on ships like the Creole and on the Creole itself, there was a practice that was disgustingly called ship wives or voyage wives. So the crew members would take women, enslaved women, and bring them into their cabin, and they would be domestic maids for them, but also they would be raped or sexually assaulted for the duration of the voyage. So this practice took place on the Creole. So it was when I was reading about the Creole and came across that section, specifically talking about a girl named Mary, who was 14 at the time, who was taken as one of these shipwives. It was right at the time that Daniel Holtzclaw was also on trial in Oklahoma, and Daniel Holtzclaw was a white police officer who was using his position as a police officer to rape and sexually assault poor black women in a poor black neighborhood.
And what year are we talking about for that?
This was 2015,
right,
2016.
So super current. Right.
So it was reading that about 1842, and also reading these articles about Daniel Holtzclaw in 2015 and 2016 that really like drove home this idea of matching the frequencies across time and space, that we consider these events, chattel slavery, to be a static historical event, but in fact, as Saidiya Hartman says, we still live in the afterlife of slavery. Like we can't, so there's a distance between these two things that I became interested in collapsing.
Right, right. Why did you choose the title of Ballast? What does that mean for this exhibit?
So Ballast Ballast is still in use today. It just means that it's the placeholder weight for cargo. And so in the 1840s, for human cargo, they would have used most likely large iron bars. And the bars are loaded into the ships, they get into the port, the bars are taken out, and the cargo is loaded on. And so partially, I chose Ballast because of how benign it is, to highlight the fact that a ship full of people is just a cargo ship. It had a standard manifest, a standard form that was filled out with names and ages and skin tones, like any other manifest would have been. So there's the banality of it, but also there's the component of the concept of counterweight and the ways in which historically and currently blackness and black people are asked and commanded to be counterweight for our own destruction, or a placeholder for our own destruction. The controlling image of black people as violent and as aggressive and as dangerous becomes the very excuse and the very reason why you could die. So that concept of ballast, that concept of the counterweight, of a placeholder for your own kind of freight, for that kind of weight, also came into play.
That's very powerful. How have people responded, and what have you hoped or wanted people to experience or take away, if you have?
Yes, the response has been overwhelmingly great. It seems that people are engaging with it, which is really the only thing that I wanted. I don't think that there was a specific way that I wanted people to engage with it, but ultimately, it is a show and it is a project about black interiority and about the kind of dislocation that happens when society deems you a non-being or commodity, and what it's like to live inside of that. So I think, I don't know if there is a specific way to engage with that, except to show up and attempt to connect to the work.
Well, I think people respond because you have done it extremely well. That's why people respond to something. It's not a generality. It's very specific. Well, it's a fabulous show, and I want to push it. It has another week. Ballast runs through Sunday, February 3rd at the Frye Art Museum. Hours and locations. Location fryemuseum.org, and you can keep up on everything Quenton, including the book that is coming out. We think sometime soon.
It will be coming out.
It will be coming out. That's what we're saying. On his website, quentonbaker.com. Well, thank you so much. And I have to give a shout out to your outfit.
Oh,
it's just
thank
so
you.
great. The shoes, the top. Can I say a top?
It's a top.
It's a top.
It's on the top.
It's a top. Thank you so much. That's great.